Hi, everybody. Jeff Lifson, joined by Terry Finley, by Aaron Birkenauer, who's working the Hammond organ today and making sure this podcast goes off seamlessly. And Tom Bellhouse is here as a not so casual but happy observer. And this is the beginning of our 2021 podcasts. These are great opportunities to work with industry insiders, outsiders, people that have an impact on what we do on a regular basis, racing and enjoying it as owners and fans. And today it's a real delight and kind of a celebration of sorts to welcome a good friend, Shawn Smeallie, to the podcast. And I say celebration because he's really part of the West Point family. Um, Sometimes he wants to disown us, but most of the time he's pretty happy about that. He's been a long-time racing partner, and we've been proud to see him working really tirelessly to improve our sport through the halls of Congress in Washington, D.C. That's where he does his day job, so to speak. And that's where those of us who want to see horse racing survive and prosper, we all really scored a big victory a few weeks ago with the passage of the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act. It's been a long time coming, and Shawn has been the main player working behind the scenes as a really great asset for racing in Washington. He worked in the elder Bush administration, President George H.W. Bush in the late 80s and the 90s. He was a special assistant to the president for legislative affairs in 90 to 93. And he later moved into a lobbying role, founding American Continental Group in 1994. And really his areas of expertise include defense, trade, energy, tax, and environmental issues, although he is an expert and a passionate advocate for horse racing, and he's a participant. In fact, Shawn is coming off a huge win. He's a partner on our three-year-old colt a long time ago, who scored a debut victory, and a pretty impressive one, Shawn, yesterday at Aqueduct, or the 21st, if this is a little bit dated.
Yeah, that was great.
So where were you when you were watching that race?
I'm embarrassed to say I was taking a hike and I totally forgot about it, which is probably why it won. Because if I had watched it and bet on it, it probably would have got nipped by a nose. So all's well that ends well, as they say.
Well, here I am building you up as this big racing guy, but you've got to make sure you take care of your soul and your health. So I'm glad you were hiking, and thank goodness for Jeff Lowe, who does all the replays, so you can play that sucker over and over again.
And I did.
He ran huge.
And I did. Yeah.
First off, I want to give people a chance to see, how you got about all of this. I know you grew up in the Saratoga Springs area, but how did you get specifically the bug or interested in horse racing?
Well, like a lot of folks, I'm sure, it's one of the great gifts a grandfather can give to a grandson, right? And I went to my first races 8 years old with my grandfather on my birthday in August, and just really fell in love with it right there. And then my brothers and my stepfather and everybody got equally involved. And in the early 90s, actually 80s and 90s, my stepfather got into owning horses, and he had some success, mostly at Saratoga. And so there's nothing like catching the bug than being in the winner's circle a few times. And once I started the business, my business partner, David Urban, who actually went to West Point with Terry, connected Terry and me. And the first things out of Terry was, "Do I have a horse for you?" So lucky for me, it was Saratoga Russell, which was a good horse. So that ended up being a great thing. So
no lie. And it's been a lot of fun to get to know your family as well. Shawn, I know we kind of get together, especially around sales time at Saratoga and over there at the Fasig-Tipton sales grounds. It's just such a magical night. And I know you and your wife and your kids have gotten a kick out of that. And we, in turn, have been we've been really blessed to have you as a partner all these years, because your enthusiasm and understandably your ability to help the industry is pretty unique. So it's been a great role. It really has.
Well, it was a really a perfect storm of things, because not only did I grow up horse racing and involved with you all, but I also worked with the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. So when the Jockey Club invited Travis back in 2012 to address the roundtable, I'm the one to help facilitate it, right? So I was sort of there at the beginning when they were doing, a little dance with Travis to trying to get him interested and helping out with, at the point was just advising, right? And it really took off from there. But also because, I've got to know you all so well and how important this bill was to your business, your specific business, right? Because there are a lot of times, and I personally, a lot of times where you just had this bad feeling that you got beat by a horse that maybe wasn't running on its own natural ability. And Terry, you and I can talk about a couple of those directly. And it's discouraging. And I think the fact now that you, with this bill, which we'll get into more later, the fact that you can get into a horse and know that it's going to be more of a level playing field than it's probably ever been, is not only going to be great for your business, but it's just going to get more people excited about horse racing, I think.
Well, you talk about an 8-year journey from 2012 when, as
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned, the Jockey Club up there in Saratoga first sort of started getting interested in all of this. What is the best way to summarize the bill, the act? What will it do? What's it all about, Shawn?
So the most important thing, and this is what I learned working with the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency for 20 years, was if you don't have independence and who's overseeing the anti-doping program, you don't have a doping program. And of course, the horse racing also had compounded issues that every racing jurisdiction really had its own set of rules. They maybe had some broad guidelines that are defined, but the reality is they had their own set of rules and own set of rules of how to change the rules. Some had to go, can be done by a racing commission. Others had to go through state legislatures. So it was sort of set up for failure. I mean, right now, if you look at what the U.S. anti-doping does for human athletes, most of their testing is out of competition because that's where all the doping occurs, right? No one's really dumb enough anymore to dope right before, except for a few Russian athletes, to dope right before an event, right? And so what they do is they dope before, and then they still have the positive effects of doping, and that's what was going on in horse racing. And I think you're going to see a real sea change when you have horses being tested out of competition. It's actually easier because 90% of the horses are at one of three places, right? They're either at the track, at a training facility, or at a farm, right? So the reality is you can kind of keep track of them a little bit better and be easier to do. But that's where you're going to see the independence and the uniformity are going to be the two keys to success here.
Well, the Horse Racing Integrity Act, I think it was first introduced maybe 5 years ago, Shawn.
Yep.
So it's kind of a process of 5 years plus a little bit more. You mentioned the Jockey Club, your own efforts, some other industry leaders, Terry included,
Absolutely.
who really, I think kept going with this through the ups and downs of the legislative process and, kept building support. Additionally, many West Point partners wrote their representatives last year. So we want to thank our partners for also getting involved.
If I could just say something there, it's like, it took people like Terry because, it wasn't necessarily a popular move that Terry did, certainly with the New York Horsemen. And it was a divisive issue. And I think it took, a lot of courage because, for people to stand up against the status quo when people's livelihoods are involved in it, it's not an easy thing. So, the folks that stood up, obviously, Arthur and Stacy Hancock and those who kind of led the charge. But, Terry, you were one of the first ones to get on once this thing started moving as an owner. And it was really important. And, you mentioned process. We did start this thing 5.5 years ago. It was a process from day one. We had to put a coalition together. The coalition had to come up with, agree on one single bill, right? They all had to sign up on it. There was a lot of activity getting everybody comfortable with that. And then we really, it was a 5-year process to get the rest of the industry comfortable with it. And part of that was introducing him to Travis Tigert, the head of USADA. And they realized he didn't have horns, that, he was doing it for the good of the game. And I think that went a long way. And I think a lot of people started to see the benefits of it. But, you can't discount also the fact that, you had all those horrible equine fatalities out in Santa Anita, which really shone a spotlight on the industry itself. So it took it out of this dark corner and really put it front and center. And people started to realize, like, what is going on here, right? And, the drug issue wasn't front and center there. I think track safety was primarily. But, one of the things that's completely unregulated is what drugs can, even the therapeutics, what therapeutics can a horse run on while they're training, right? And if a horse is running, obviously thinking it's healthy and it's on some therapeutic, that could have an impact. So it all kind of worked together. And then, of course, the coup de grace was the FBI, announcement in March with the 27 people. And I think that really was the final straw, right? That was the tipping point, as we expected it would be.
Terry, that's a great segue. And Shawn, you mentioned the indictments of Navarro and Service and a number of other people, some veterinarians and some other assistant trainers. And that took place, I think, last March. So Terry, from your perspective, what did that do, with some of the other industry insiders, like trainers that you were working with, to try to, twist some arms and get people to join in, to be on board?
Well, I tell you, well, thank you very much, Shawn, for joining us today. The partners are really going to appreciate this. But, we really thought that and saw, I think, the sea change that Shawn talks about. I was at the sale in OBS, and the virus was starting to come into play, and then the indictments happened. And it was really ironic that they both came within a couple, days of each other. But, trainers, they started to talk amongst each other, and they started to say, or they started to see the people and the organizations that for the last 30 or 40 years have been saying, listen, I got this, just give us a little bit more time. I think they started to see that gig was up, and the fact that there was a viable plan, right, that had been tried and proven in other sports. I really think, especially some of the big trainers, actually led by Todd Pletcher, and then we got a bunch of our trainers on board. But Todd was really the voice, I think, that cut through a lot of the static. And I don't think it took long. And I know Shawn went on the radio, and I'd love for you to tell everybody about that radio spot on the Steve Bick Show, Shawn. But also, ironically, the editors of the Washington Post, right? They took it upon themselves at the beginning of May to call upon the federal government to abolish our game. And I'd love for Shawn to kind of talk through what the cascade that started with that op-ed at the beginning of May in the Washington Post did. And ultimately, I think we can trace a big push in the bill to that op-ed.
Yeah, how did all things swirl as far as that goes? What started happening, Shawn, when all that stuff kind of went down?
So many things started happening, but most importantly, there was the Washington Post had an op-ed by Baffert calling on behalf of the bill. And then right across it, an op-ed from an editorial from the Washington Post saying it's time to end racing. And that was literally the first time that Senator McConnell said, oh my gosh, these people are right. There's an issue here. And he first time recognized that there was an existential threat to the industry itself. And shortly thereafter, he called a lot of leaders in the industry and said, you come up with a bill you can agree on in 2 weeks, or I'll come up with one for you. And then we put together, Terry was very much involved in that, banged out a bill. We sent it to the McConnell staff. They had to get it through, which ended up being a longer than expected process, getting it through Ledge Council. And I will say, one of the few benefits of COVID was word never got out to any of our opponents that this was going on. And this had to be for 2 months. And usually when there's, people are out drinking, they start talking, all the words get out and everything kind of it can explode. Nothing really happened, and I'm convinced it's because people were out drinking with each other, letting the state secrets out. So as a result, they were really able to put a pretty airtight bill together, and then we were able to get Senator Gillibrand of New York to co-sponsor the bill with McConnell, then drop it in. Once the House realized the Senate was serious about it, then they went ahead and had a markup. It was the first markup of the bill. We had a hearing earlier in the year, but had a full committee markup that got through. Came out with just a handful of votes against, and then we passed the floor by voice vote, which is hard to do. So we had basically unanimously approved the bill out of the House to come to the Senate. And as some of you know, the Senate's a different creature altogether. McConnell tried to get unanimous consent to bring consent to bring the bill up well before Christmas. And just as he was in that process, Ruth Bader Ginsburg had the misfortune of passing away, which really kind of set the Senate in a different mode immediately. And though we kept pushing it, but relations between Schumer, who was a supporter of the bill, and McConnell started to fray. And even then, we were close to getting a bill passed by unanimous consent. And then, ironically, one of the early senators who was a pioneer in this effort objected because he didn't think the bill went. Tom Udall of New Mexico felt the bill didn't go strong enough. And so as a result, we had to take the provision, the bill, and actually stick it as a provision in the omnibus appropriations bill, which was that big catch-all bill that passed at the end of the year. So, but anyways, it was never easy, the whole process, but I always felt that there was enough critical mass of the industry and the media, and I got to say, the Jockey Club taking a really strong leap of faith of joining hands with the Humane Society, which is, for horsemen was not an easy thing for them. That partnership not only paid dividends for this bill, but will probably pay dividends for the industry for the foreseeable future. So I think Jim and Stuart really need to be commended about, their ability to kind of peek around the corner and realize how important that partnership was. So, and as a result, that's what really got us through in the end, was that, the fact that the industry was united, mostly united, and that you had the animal welfare group sign off.
And Shawn, we know that this all takes effect on July 1st, 2022. So about a year and a couple of months from now. Mm-hmm. What are the big pieces of the puzzle between now and then that need to be sort of put in place, and what role will Shawn Smeallie have in that?
Well, implementation is always the second hardest thing. The first hardest thing is to actually pass a bill, then implementing is the second hardest thing. And we actually put a provision to kick the implementation down another 6 months, because we knew the schedule is going to be tough. And so the bill requires approval, not necessarily oversight, but approval from the Federal Trade Commission. That's what makes our bill constitutional and passes constitutional, because we have FTC minimal oversight, but they have to approve the regulation. So to do that, they have to have a 60-day comment period and all these type of things. And so you have to work back. So we literally by August this year have to have a lot of things kind of in place, including a contract that this new authority has to have with the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. And so, right now, one of the things we're working on, as Terry knows, we're putting together nominees to be part of the authority, and who's going to be on the different committees within there. So I'm hoping that will be in clear picture by the end of February, and that once they are together and constituted, then they can reach out to USADA. The good news is that I've had great conversations with Ed Martin and the Racing Commissioners International. I think is going to be very helpful in this process. And so that's important because the way the bill's set up is that there's a lot of negotiations with each of the state racing commissions and how they want to participate. And some of that goes into your, probably the people concerned about cost, right? So I think you'll see, states have an option to, either figure out how they want to provide whatever the costs are going to be, or, have this authority, retrieve those costs directly. A study that was put together thought it would be somewhere around $35 per horse per start extra. And, but that doesn't take into account, I think, some of the efficiencies of having one entity do it. And it certainly doesn't take into account the amount, and Terry knows this, you all know very well, the amount of drugs that are put into a horse, right? So I think the fact that, there's going to be very little Lasix going forward, and probably a lot less therapeutics going forward will hopefully more than offset the cost. And as Terry knows, costs typically filter down to the owners eventually, right? So I know everybody on this call is very keenly aware of that, but you know what vet bills you pay, and you know what the difference is going to be when they're using a lot less drugs.
I was going to ask the question basically, about funding, but I think you really touched on that. I am curious, sort of as somebody who's not just a racing fan, but a sports fan, and somebody who's, aside from what you do on your day job, is like a member of the human race, and has seen a number of, different types of drug reforms in different types of industries. Are there some parallels to the reforms that have been enacted in the cycling world since our good friend Lance Armstrong kind of set the world upside down there?
I think that, baseball, track and field, it's almost the same playbook every time. And it's, it's a lot of denial. Then it's, negotiation. I could go through the whole 12 steps, right? But in the end, it's, if you go back to any of the sport federations who used to, do the drug testing with the U.S. Olympic Committee, you literally could not pay them enough money to take this responsibility back. And I am sure that the racing commissioner, this has always been the redheaded stepchild of what they do. And they're going to be so happy to get rid of this responsibility going forward. And I will say that, once people think that there's a potential for a level playing field, even the potential, things move pretty quickly. And I think you saw that in baseball. You definitely seen that in the Olympics. The question is, Lance Armstrong continued to dope even after the USADA and people getting more serious about it because of arrogance. And the question is, who's going to be the Lance Armstrong of horse racing, right? who's going to say the rules don't matter to me? You know what I mean? So, and it will happen. I guarantee you, there's going to be somebody who's going to decide that he has to win at all costs, and it's worth the risk, and it's not going to end well for them. So, yeah, there's a plenty of parallels, but I tell you that when you get to the other side of it, it's really going to be a great day, great day for racing when this bill passed, and I have nothing but deep optimism about especially for organizations like yours and other horse owners that really put a lot of their heart and soul and treasure into horse racing, and then just to see how discouraged some of them are because of the concerns about cheating.
We're dreamers in this game, Shawn.
Sure.
We're dreamers about
always dreaming,
hoisting the cup over our heads, about doing it at a place that has great meaning to us, like a Saratoga or a Del Mar or a Churchill Downs, et cetera. What are your personal dreams about what this act and this revolution, in and testing and all the things that come with it can do for our game.
Well, I think if you look back at baseball, what happened after baseball? They were, worried that there weren't going to be enough home runs hit or whatever, and the sport got more popular than ever. And I really think that our sport has lost a lot of its luster, and I think this is going to bring it back. And you got a convergence of two things happening. You had people that were denied, going to Saratoga and going to Del Mar and some of these great places, and they're going to be like bears out of hibernation, right? When they come out, they're going to be eager. And I think coming out with the promise that things are going to be, cleaner and more fair is going to be, I think it's going to be a great thing for the racing. And I really think there's nothing but upside. People are going to be willing to invest more going forward. And I think that's going to show in the participation and the enthusiasm for the game. So I have nothing but optimism for it.
I can see why. And it's wonderful to hear somebody who's been working, as we said, tirelessly for not just 5 years, but really 8 years or longer on this, to see it come to fruition. We've all patted Terry on the back and he deserves it, but I don't think I've had a personal chance to say thank you to you, Shawn, for believing in this, and because how it works, seeing it through, even though it's not completely done, as you mentioned, the Federal Trade Commission, some of these other hoops and things that we need to jump through. Terry, I'm going to let you kind of wrap things up with Shawn before we conclude as well. Is there anything that you want to say to Shawn or ask?
Well, I think it's a good segue, Jeff. You talked about it. I would just love for Shawn to talk about the aspect, right? You represent a lot of different companies and interests in DC. You have one of the top lobbying firms in DC. And I think we've talked about it a little bit. You've over the last 30 years, you've had a lot of different issues that you've worked through when you've got over the goal line. I just, on behalf of the industry, I express our gratitude to you, because I know what the passion that you brought to this. So I just thought it was always cool that you were able to bring your expertise in our government affairs with your passion in the horse business. And for the last 5 or 6 years, combine them. Just thought it was cool to see how much enjoyment you got out of the movement, and especially over the last couple of months to see everything just kind of fall into place. I thought it was really, really cool. So I just say that to you.
People can go their whole career in my business and never work on an issue that they feel passionately about, right? And I always thank my lucky stars that I was there at the right time, at the right place, that we're already working with the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, and it was a logical choice to bring my firm and me aboard. But I had more darn fun. I wouldn't tell this to Jim, but I would have probably done it for free.
We won't tell Jim that.
Yeah, don't tell that.
So we'll keep that between us, Shawn.
Yeah, just between
all
us.
our partners.
Did you find any members of the House of Representatives or the Senate that wants to own a piece of a racehorse? I'm going to use Terry's old line here. Have I got a horse for one of them?
I'll send them your way for sure. But this has been great, guys. I really appreciate it. And there were times when I thought I would never have this conversation because things look so dark. It was always one step forward, 2 steps back, and then, but it was an extraordinarily big team effort. There was no way around it. And certainly not one person was involved, but it really took, in the end, the industry to do it, and a lot of other people. And it was great to be a part of it and help shepherd it through. But it took a lot of people in the industry like Terry and you guys to really make it happen, because it's hard to pass a legislative bill like that really can transform an industry. And it really takes a lot of participants. So thank you guys for doing it. And thanks for this opportunity. It's great. It's always fun to talk about it.
Actually, the day after the bill passed, right, Shawn, he got about 40 people together on a Zoom call. And I don't know, we talked for about an hour, Shawn. I don't think I saw any single person lose their smile for the
It's
entire
true.
hour.
It's
There
true.
were smiles like across and down and on the
Yeah.
entire matrix. And
Yep.
I saw teeth the whole time. So
Yeah, it's very true.
you brought a lot of joy and a lot of optimism and a lot of hope to our business. So, and I told people you need to be the head of the authority too. So we're going to work on that.
No. I got plenty to keep me busy. Thank you.
Well, Shawn, thank you. Terry, Aaron, Tommy, I know you've been a silent partner on this call. Thank you for your time. And personally, I just hope I can see you in the paddock at Saratoga this summer, when a long, long time ago was running in whatever grade.
I literally can't wait. I literally can't wait. So
Exactly.
all right, guys.
So
Thank
for
you so
all of us,
much.
See you, Shawn.
thank
Enjoy.
you, Shawn, and partners. I hope you enjoyed this. This is the first, the kickoff, and we'll have more of the same, meaning more interesting podcasts coming up in the weeks and months to come. Take care.